You can see the structure on page 1, and if you just glance at it, what we're going to review is the dialogue, which is 4 through 27. Then we're going to review Job's monologue, and then Elihu's speeches. So, page 2 is the reviews.
Friends offered glib answers and a condemning spirit.
Yes, so that's the friends, and now Job.
Job responds with self-justification and hard questions.
Right. Now remember, self-justification sounds very negative to us, but what he means is he's saying, no, I am just. I haven't sinned. I haven't sinned in a way so as to cause this. He's not saying he never sinned. He's saying I didn't do anything to deserve this, which the reader knows is true. Okay, so that's the summary of the dialogue. Now the summary of Job's monologues. Debbie, could you read those 2 little paragraphs there?
Job retains his faith and devotion to God, even though he questions God's justice, righteousness, and asks or demands for some answers and asks to plead his case before God. Job is not looking for answers. He also longs for a personal encounter with God in which God will vindicate him and his suffering.
Right. So, 3 main things. He's questioning God's justice. He's questioning why this happened. He wants answers, but he also wants a personal encounter with God. Okay, so one of the big themes here is the silence of God. Okay, now a summary of Elihu, which we covered last week. Number 1.
Elihu rebukes Job and his 3 friends. You all start with the same premise. Suffering equals precise, calculable punishment for sin.
Okay, so you see that? That's the assumption of Job and his friends.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now number 2.
But God may have questions we don't know about.
Okay.
Reasons, not questions. Oh.
It's okay.
Started off with me forgetting my glasses, now I'm all out of whack. Sometimes he even speaks through pain. He doesn't owe us an explanation. You must accept suffering, even if you don't understand why. You must have faith when you don't understand why. You must have patience and perseverance when it takes far longer than you think it should.
Okay, so that's what Elihu said. Now, Elihu says some other things that are not so great, but that's the gist of what he contributes to the conversation. And that is true, because basically God is just and God is good, so we need to accept and have faith and have perseverance. Okay, so now at last on page 3, God finally speaks in this big long conversation. And we want to really dive into this, so let's see. Natalie, could you read verses 1 through 3 of chapter 38? That's the top of page 3.
Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. He said, "Who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me."
Okay, so according to verses 1 through 3, which Natalie just read, are God's actions, even the painful ones, are they random?
No.
And how do you know that from verses 1 through 3?
He says he has plans.
He says he has plans. Exactly. He has a plan. Okay. So what is God's criticism, according to those 3 verses, of Job?
And he's questioning him.
Words and knowledge.
He has plans that we have no knowledge
He's
of.
obscuring his.
Mm-hmm. And what you're obscuring them with is words without knowledge. Job doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay? We see this all the time. I remember one time asking a coworker why all the grass had been ripped up I worked on a college campus as a maintenance man. And he said, well, the college wants to save money, and so all this grassland they're just going to let just grow. They're calling it an eco thing, but really it means they won't have to pay mowers. Okay? And so I was like, oh, wow, that's very interesting. That was an insightful comment. Then, a couple days later, I talked to the guy in charge of that decision, and he said, this part of Indiana has the most beautiful wildflowers. He said, but no one, as far as I can tell, no one has ever designed a campus or anything to utilize those flowers. So what we're going to do is, he said, we're tearing up all the grass and we're going to let these wildflowers grow, and if there's ever an invasive one in, we're going to come and poison just that plant. And so he had plans laid out for what parts of the grass they were going to keep and what parts they were going to let grow wildflowers. He had a huge plan. So my friend, who was, nailing stuff to the wall, that was his job, he didn't know what he was talking about. There was a whole plan he didn't know about. We do that all the time. I'm probably guilty of that constantly. Talking about stuff and I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, now, God now, as he said, he's going to ask a bunch of questions. He asks a bunch of questions. So, Bev, could you read 4 through 13?
Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy? Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made the clouds its garment and wrapped it in thick darkness? When I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place? When I said, this far you may come and no further. Here is where your proud waves halt. Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place, that it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it?
Except for me and NIV.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Good. So what is the topic of the question in verse 4? We're going to try to list the topics of the questions.
Where were you, Joe?
Creation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Where were you doing? But the topic would be creation. Good. And verse 5, what's the topic of that question?
Who created?
Dimensions of creation.
Yeah. So both of those are correct. But the topic I'd like to emphasize is, the size of the earth, which, we think we understand, because I think the earth is something like 25,000 miles around, somewhere in that neighborhood. And here's the reason why we think we understand that. Because we understand the number 25,000. When it comes to money, we can kind of comprehend 25,000. And we understand what 1 mile is. So we think, well, I'll just put those together at 25,000 miles. I can understand that. But you can't understand that. Now, maybe the person who comes closest to understanding that is Dean Nicholson, who last year rode his bike 25,000 miles. Okay. Yeah. But even then, if he had walked it, I think he would have a deeper understanding of it. We talked about this before with the Appalachian Trail. But it's a problem that, because I've seen a globe and I've seen those numbers, measurements on it, I feel like, I basically get how big the world is. But I don't. Okay, so at least the ancient man knew they didn't. So that's the point of that. Okay, what's the topic of 8 through 11?
Sea.
Mm-hmm, the sea and...
Clouds
Atmosphere.
And the tides, right? This is how far you can come. And every day it looks like the ocean's going to keep going, but then it stops and it goes back. Now, again, as modern people, we have a problem, because we think, I read something about how the moon's gravity is what causes the tides. Well, the truth is we don't even understand the gravity we experience every day. We think we do. But Einstein showed us that we don't know what we're talking about with gravity. Anyway, that's not important. The important thing is there are mysterious things about this world that Job certainly does not understand. And we probably understand less. Because science has deluded us into thinking we understand all these things. Anyway, okay, the topic of 12 through 13.
What's 11?
What was 8 to 11?
8 through 11 was the sea and the tide.
Has mysterious limits. Is it? You said they have mysterious limits that we can't comprehend. Like
Well, mysterious forces.
forces.
Yeah, what causes them, what makes them stop.
Okay.
Apparently it has something to do with the moon's gravity and the rotation of the earth working together somehow. Anyway, I can't understand. I read the article and I can't understand it. So, all right. And then 12 through 13, what's the topic of that?
The day
Mm-hmm.
Given the orders, and it obeys you.
Yeah, that he gives orders to the morning. Now, G.K. Chesterton said it's possible that it's not set like a clock, like it just is going to go naturally. God every morning says, okay, today I'm commanding another sunrise, which he's doing continually because there's in different parts of the earth, there's constantly a sunrise.
Giving orders?
You can just put dawn as a topic. So God is not only is dawn difficult to understand, especially for Job. What causes that is that God is controlling it. He's giving orders to it. Okay, and now let's read 14 to 24. Let's see. Diane, could you read that? Verses 14.
The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. Keep going.
Yeah, the whole rest of them.
The rest of it, okay. The wicked are denied their light, and their upraised arm is broken. Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the deepest darkness? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of earth? Tell me, if you know all this. What is the way to the abode of light, and where does darkness reside? Can you take them to their places? Do you know the path to their dwellings? Surely you know, for you were already born. You have lived so many years. Well, he obviously wasn't born. Those things happened.
Okay, yeah.
That's
Yes. So what is 19 through 21 talking about? This is the blank in the box on the right. 19 through 21. What is it? What is the topic, or what is it asking about?
Light, darkness.
How day and night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where does light come from? Now, in preparation for this, I thought I would look up about whether light is a wave or a particle and all that, physics stuff. And it turns out I understand it less now than I did when I started reading that. Because I just discovered that, according to NASA, at the speed of light, space and time no longer exist. I don't know what that means.
Well,
But
they showed it. Did you see the picture of the astronaut that come back and his twin brother? They took a picture of them side by side. He didn't age in space.
wow.
And his brother looked a lot older than him.
yeah,
Amazing picture.
yeah, it's crazy. I don't know. Yes. So anyway, we don't even understand what light is, let alone where it comes from. Obviously, we know from Genesis chapter 1 where it comes from, but okay. Now, the box, I couldn't fit all of this chapter, so I put a little box of 22 through 24. Sue, could you read the box on the bottom right? 22.
Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth.
So what are the four things that he's basically saying, where do these things come from?
Weather comes from.
But snow, hail, lightning,
Winds.
and wind. There's four more things. Okay, all showing things that Job does not understand, let alone control, like God. Okay. We're doing good on time. I think we're going to get through it. All right. 25 to 35, Donna.
Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain and a path for the thunderstorm, to water a land where no one lives, an uninhabited desert, to satisfy a desolate wasteland and makes it sprout with grass? Does the rain have a father? Who fathers the drops of dew? From whose womb comes the ice? Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens, when the waters become hard as stone, when the surface of the deep is frozen? We're in 35, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you bind the chains of the
Pleiades.
Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons? Or lead out a bear of its cubs? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? Can you raise your voice to the clouds and cover yourself with a flood of water? Do you send the lightning bolts on their way? Do they report to you? Here we are. Who gives the ibis wisdom?
Hold on.
Opus.
Yeah. Okay, so what are the topics of 25 to 27? What's the topic of that?
Rain,
Mm-hmm.
Weather.
Yeah, good. And then 28? Oh, it's basically the same.
water,
Yeah, rain.
different forms of water.
Yeah, different forms of water. Now 29 through 30, again water, but this time what? Ice, frost. Yeah. Okay, a lot about water. All right, 31 to 32.
Stars,
Mm-hmm. Constellations, stars. Even the bear with his cubs is a constellation. That's why bear is capitalized. Okay, 33 to 35.
the laws of heaven, God's dominion.
Heavens and earth.
Yeah, so this time, perhaps it's moving into, those are correct, but it's moving into control. Not, do you understand where they come from, like the previous page, but can you control them? Do they report to you? So that actually began in 31 when he started saying, can you do this? The questions changed from, do you understand this, to, can you do this? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Do you lead the constellations into their places? Okay. Now, these 6 verses, 36 to 41, all have one topic. So be looking for that, Penny, as Penny reads this, 36 to 41.
Who gives the abyss wisdom, or gives the rooster understanding? Who has the wisdom to count the clouds? Who can tip over the water jars of heavens? When the dust becomes hard and the clods of earth stick together, do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions? When they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in a thicket? Who provides food for the raven when its young cry out to God and wander about for lack of food?
So what are those verses about?
Providing
For?
this creation,
Yeah.
animals.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. God takes care of the animals. Can you do that, Job? Not maybe a couple. If you're a farmer, maybe a couple hundred, but there's a lot more than that in this world. Okay. What do all those questions and from chapter 38 have in common? So we just went through a whole lot of questions on these last 2 pages.
knowledge, understanding.
Mm-hmm.
God's sovereignty.
Yes. So, knowledge, understanding, and control. Each question is designed to show Job all the kinds of things he cannot do, things only God can do.
Knowledge, understanding, and control.
Understanding and control, like ability to understand and ability to do. Only God can understand those things. Only God can do those things.
And doesn't it all point to wisdom?
And why?
It's all in God's wisdom.
Wisdom and power, yes.
Why?
Yeah, why give all those questions? We see what they have in common.
Show Job his folly.
To show Job his folly, okay. Anything else?
To remind one how small they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, specifically Job, but then secondarily us, yeah.
To show God's sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Yes, and there's a clue coming that I think will shed some light on these questions. Chapter 40, verse 2, Debbie, could you read that? It's in the black box.
Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him.
So he gives all those questions. Now he says, you're contending with me, you're going to correct me. Okay, let the accuser, let him answer me. You were asking me questions, now I'm asking you questions, you better answer. Now, if you would ask God, why? Maybe you have. And God showed up and drilled you with all these questions, how would you answer? I know this is hypothetical, but if he did,
I'd be speechless, probably.
I feel pretty insignificant at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How stupid of it.
Yeah.
yeah, you would have no idea what to answer.
Yeah.
Just repent and
Yeah.
thank him for his grace.
Yeah, well, let's see what Job actually says. It's at the bottom of this page. Diane, could you read it at the bottom of page 4?
Okay, if you would ask God why,
No,
Well, the next one.
always reading
no,
it
no,
wrong.
no.
It's okay.
Good grief. He says, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more.
Okay.
Finally realized, shut up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned my lesson, but God does not let him off the hook at that answer. He drills him with a bunch more questions. I don't have them all, but I just included a few of them. Natalie, could you read that section there, 6 through 14?
Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me.
Okay, just pause there.
Would you?
So, no, just pause right there. Job has just said, I don't have anything to answer. And so now God says, well, guess what? I'm going to ask you more questions. So Job's probably thinking something along the lines of,
Oh, yeah.
But he keeps saying, brace yourself.
Yeah, I
like a
know.
man.
That in itself would scare you.
That says to me, I need to act like a man.
Yes.
yeah. But he's just said, I don't have any answers, so this is not good. Yes. So, okay, now Natalie, finish 8 through 14.
Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's, and can your voice thunder like his? Then adorn yourself with glory and splendor, and clothe yourself in honor and majesty. Unleash the fury of your wrath. Look at all who are proud and bring them low. Look at all who are proud and humble them. Crush the wicked where they stand. Bury them all in the dust together. Shroud their faces in the grave. Then I myself will admit to you that your own right hand can save you.
Okay, so this is probably the trickiest section, so that's why I have those diagrams below. But before we get to those, verse 8 gives us a clue regarding why God is showing Job his extreme limitations. We already talked about how God is showing Job his limitations compared with God's vastness. But verse 8 gives us a clue as to why God is doing that.
And he's just. And whatever
You're
else
putting
he's
yourself
just.
above me.
Yes.
Condemning God.
Yeah, you, Job, have put yourself above me. You've discredited my justice. You've said, I haven't deserved this suffering. And God, you gave me this suffering. So that means you gave me what I did not deserve. That's injustice. We would say to an earthly judge, if somebody says, in court, maybe if you challenge a speeding ticket, you can go to court against the police officer. Maybe you come before and the judge says, you were speeding, that's what the radar gun said, so I sentence you to 25 years in prison. Would we call that justice? No. We would start wondering why the judge has a vendetta against this person. We'd start, doing some research into that, because that's obviously injustice. That's what Job is saying about God. This is injustice. Yes, I've sinned, but I didn't deserve all this. And so God says, would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? So then God starts asking him, do you have an arm like God's? Can you do all the things I do? And he talks about his own justice. Can you bring down all the proud and humble them? Can you do all this? So, on the box on the top right, in order to charge God with injustice, Job has to do so from a certain position. In order to do that, he has to know all the facts, right? Because whenever you dispense justice, you take everything into consideration. You would call it injustice if you only listen to one side. If the judge only listened to one side, then gave his ruling. You say, wait a minute, you have to have all the facts. You have to listen to their side and then their side, and then determine who's right and who's wrong, and how much, and what the punishment should be. You have to have all those facts. So Job has to assume, I have all the facts that God has, which of course God has just shown him, you don't have all the facts. There's a million things you don't understand, right? You have to be at least as wise as God. So once you have all the facts, then you have to make a wise decision, taking all those things into consideration together, right? Like a child could learn a bunch of facts, but the child doesn't have the wisdom to say, based on all of this information, this is the way it should go, right? A child might say, based on all the information, I think a fair punishment would just be to execute him. I don't know, he's a bad guy, right? My kids think you kill bad guys. Whether they're robbers or murderers, doesn't matter, you just shoot them. That's justice in their mind. So not only do you have to have all the facts, you have to have the wisdom and the intelligence. And you have to have righteousness or justice. That's where those 3 bullet points are there. You have to have all 3 to determine, here's the chart. This one's tricky. Okay. So on the left, this is the way it works, right? God is there, and the blue bracket thingy represents God's understanding of the whole situation. And the green circle is the universe, and God understands the whole universe and beyond. And inside the universe is a person, and that's the black dot. So maybe me or maybe Job. And the red line is God dispensing justice on a being. God takes everything into consideration. He understands the whole universe. He understands all the circumstances. He understands how your action has affected all the people around you, all the people in your church, all the people in your neighborhood, all the people in your family. Each action you do affects all those. God takes all that into consideration and then dispenses justice upon you. If you're mean, if you're just a mean, bitter person, part of God's justice is that you won't have many friends. Because you're infecting everyone around you.
If you get drunk, you just drunk and driving.
Yeah, and yes. So, that's God dispensing justice. Now, In order for Job to say, God, your justice that you dispensed was wrong, Job has to look at the chart on the right, has to put himself at the top and say, I understand all of God's wisdom and righteousness and all of that, and I understand everything he understands, and my righteousness is actually superior to his because I can say, this is your justice and righteousness, God. But comparing that to mine, you should have done something different. That's the heart of what's going on in the book of Job. So God is saying all that. Can you adorn yourself with splendor? Can you do all that? Do you have any idea of how limited you are? Not only are you not above me, you don't even understand your whole universe. You understand your little world, and you have no idea the ramifications. I was at a restaurant one time with a friend, and I was telling him I got a new job, and he happened to personally know who was going to be my boss at this new job, who I'd never met. And he gossiped about him, and he just said this, that guy's going to be your boss, he is not a good person. That was it. One sentence. A little bit of gossip. He didn't tell me what. He didn't go into the details. Okay, so for the next 2 years, I went and I met this guy. In the back of my mind was, he's not a good person. And so everything he said to me, I was judging. I was running it through a filter of, if this guy seems super nice, but if my friend is right, this is all a facade. When you start looking for a facade of someone, everything they say, there's just a huge barrier. And I eventually got to know my boss's family and his kids, and I started seeing things that I was like, oh, I can see. I bet that's what my friend meant. I could start to see these things. It wasn't until later when I looked back and I thought, man, my mind was poisoned against that whole family. I started looking for, if you look for someone's flaws, you're going to find them.
Absolutely.
Because of that one little piece of gossip. Now, my friend probably totally forgot that conversation. He probably had no idea the ramifications that came of that one bit of gossip. And every word we speak, that's why on Judgment Day we will be judged for every word, because every word has all these ramifications that maybe we should just say, well, God, if you say not to gossip, I won't do it. If you can help me stop.
Well, we shouldn't gossip.
I know, but we do it
But you
without.
can't believe everything people tell you.
I know.
See for yourself.
I know. It's hard though, because my friend didn't think, I know God says not to gossip, but I think I'm going to now. It just was just talking.
No judgment. No
Yeah, that was-
judging.
That was his
Judgment.
opinion.
Yeah, I know. I understand all of that. I'm just saying we speak. That's why actually what is said in the New Testament is every idle word will be judged. So, and that's why Proverbs says in the multitude of words, there's going to be sin.
Not judging.
Yes. Okay. So, I'm sorry, don't turn the page yet. I have one last thing to say about the chart that I think will help. Spent a lot of time coming up with this illustration, so I hope it helps. But because Job understands, because God understands all the related facts, no matter how distantly affected things are, like I talked about with the gossip, he's able to determine what should happen. In order for Job to do that, he has to understand all those ramifications, to say, God, you understand all the ramifications, and so do I, so I can see you should have done something different. It would be like me coming up to an Olympic skier and saying, on that race you just had, you should have taken the Johnson position around that third curve. I just made that up. I have no idea. I don't know anything about skiing. But imagine me coming up to him and saying, I really think you should have tucked your pole differently. And he'd be like, how many times have you skied in your life? And I was like, 3 times. So basically getting up to the single diamond by the end there, so I think you should listen to me.
The nail telling the hammer how to hit.
Yes. Now, imagine if I did that. The skier would say, first of all, you don't know anything about skiing. Second of all, the Johnson position doesn't exist. Third of all, you didn't even know what I was doing.
Fourth of all,
Didn't you know that race,
mind your own business.
mind your own business, that race that you think you thought I should go faster, didn't you know I was racing for world hunger, and for every second I was on the slopes, $1 million worth of food would be devoted to feeding impoverished countries. So I was trying to take as long as possible because I care about these people. You didn't even know I was doing that, did you? No, I thought you were trying to win. That's what Job's saying. That's what God is saying to Job. You don't even know what I'm doing here. Don't you know there's big things at stake in the cosmic realm, me and Satan, and it's a huge deal. There's principalities and powers that you don't even know exist. They're all watching this.
That's why we got to be led by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, because it's so much beyond us. Okay, now on page 6. Does God charge, so God finally speaks and criticizes Job, and does God charge Job with sin that brought on his suffering? No. Does God tell Job why he suffered? Does God challenge Job's defense of his own integrity? Meaning, does he say, you told your friends, I'm not guilty of anything, and you shouldn't have said that?
No, he didn't challenge that. I think he did.
He said, you shouldn't have condemned me in defending yourself.
Why?
You should have said, I'm not guilty. I don't know what God's doing. I'm surely not going to say he's guilty. It doesn't make sense, but one thing I know is I'm not guilty.
So he did challenge
No, he doesn't. He doesn't challenge him in defending himself. What God criticizes Job for is, in doing so, you made it look like I was guilty. Now, actually, Job goes back and forth on that. He says, I know God's just, but look what's happening to me. So, kind of makes you wonder. And at different times, he goes back and forth. We talked about that last week. There's those statements. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. In that one statement, there's both doubt and strong faith. Okay, so exactly for defending himself, God doesn't challenge him. So then why does God call Job on the carpet?
So Job is made more aware of the vastness and sovereignty of God.
Yeah, the greatness of God.
Because by saying that he was unjust, he was defending himself, making himself better than God, really, in a way.
Excusing him for being unjust.
Yeah. He needed to understand God better. And certainly you'll see through the end of this, Job does understand God better and God's greatness. Does God answer Job's questions about the problem of evil and suffering? That was a big theme. Why would people suffer? No, he doesn't. Okay, God doesn't do that, but God does make it very clear what answers are not acceptable in God's universe. He doesn't give the answer, but he says, here's some answers that you may not do. And I've listed some of them. Penny, could you read them one at a time, and I'll say something about each one?
Okay, number 1, I know better than you what choices you should make.
This is us human beings saying this to God.
Yes.
Obviously, you should never say that. Okay.
Number 2, I can sit in judgment on your decisions because my opinion
Do you not hear people say this?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Why did God do that?
they say this. One of two things. I will not believe in God because he did this bad thing. He allowed this bad thing to happen.
Right. Yeah.
They say, I don't believe in God because God chose, if God's real, he chose to do this thing. And because my opinion of what's right and wrong is better than God's, I can see that if your God exists, he did something bad. Right? Or they say this, I do believe in God, but not God in the way you say. Because the real God would never tell the Israelites to wipe out the Canaanites.
Right.
The real God would never say that. Because my understanding of what's right and wrong, my understanding of justice is superior to God's, to the Bible's.
Yes.
And so therefore, the real God must not be the God of the Bible. Because I can see that's wrong. If that's what God did something wrong. So he must not have done that.
But a lot of people, why they don't believe in God is they don't understand. They blame God for everything bad that happens. Why would God allow this to happen? Why would God allow? God doesn't do it. People do it.
Yes. However,
Evil does it.
God does allow it to happen.
Yeah.
That's what the book of Job is about.
But they blame God for everything.
He brought it on himself.
He allows it to happen.
Yeah, it is valid to say God allowed this murder to happen. Because
Cause it though.
he didn't cause it, but indirectly he is responsible. That's even when Satan does it to Job, God himself says, you've turned my hand against my servant. God himself claims responsibility for even Satan's actions because Satan said, can I go hurt his body with a sickness? And God said, yes.
But in your murder example, he allows Satan to tempt somebody to get angry, and use the gun, but there was consequences for their anger. So the consequences led to the murder, didn't it?
Yes, but God could have stopped the murder.
Oh yes, it could.
And in the case of Job, the murder happened by human beings. Remember, this raiding party came and killed all your animals and killed all your servants. And then with the children, it was a natural disaster. But that was Satan murdering those 10 children. And God allowed all of that. Satan came and got permission.
Yeah, you got permission to murder.
Okay, so indirectly, you're right, Natalie, God doesn't do it. God doesn't go do evil things. But he does allow evil things to happen.
But also people don't see the end result of someone getting murdered. I mean, it could result in laws being changed and people coming to know the Lord, just like Job got to know God better because of this whole ordeal.
What we know
You're
is
right.
that in
You're right
the
about
word,
that. You don't know what the end result is.
Right.
It could also mean that person's not gonna suffer and his house is ready and you're now coming into my presence. But I think the key that people miss is that they say, well, how can God be loving? Well, you can't have love unless there's free choice.
Yeah.
If you're not allowed to make a choice, but you shower love, that's not love. Love only comes when,
If we were robots.
yeah.
well, there's two things I read in the scriptures. One is all things work together for good for those who are called and who love the Lord. And the other one is that God is angry with the wicked every day.
Yeah.
But he
Bad
still
things
gets
happen to
the
good
wicked
people.
But he
years and years
reigns,
and
I know
years.
he reigns on the evil and the good.
Yeah.
But bad things do happen to good people.
Oh, yeah. That's what this whole book is about.
But it all works together for good.
Yeah. So the bottom line here is what you're saying is we don't understand the end result. We know that the end result will be for God's glory and for the good in some way. We don't know how that works. We can't imagine how a tragedy could be used for something.
Somebody
The point is there's so much we don't know. We just have to trust God.
Yeah.
But I think I told you this before. As a result
Yeah, and
Result.
that's a result that you got to see. And there might be other results that you haven't even seen. You'll find out more in heaven. But let's continue with some answers that God is not accepting. Number 3.
Number 3, I know all information that you weigh when you make a choice.
Okay, so people think that. I know all the information that God has when God makes a choice. Okay, you cannot say that because you don't. Number 4.
Number 4, you owe me an explanation for your choice.
Oh, really?
That's you can see how people think that. But that God is saying you may not say that. Number 5.
5, you are unjust or unrighteous.
That's obvious, but that's what a big thing in Job is. You can never say that about God. And lastly,
6, Almighty God should be more interested in giving us explanations for what he does than in being worshipped and trusted.
He doesn't need to give you an explanation.
so
Understand it if he did.
yeah, that's right. So those are some things that that the book of Job is teaching. Okay.
Probably most of us have been guilty of some of them.
Yes.
But you know, how arrogant can you be to question God?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So, let's see. Debbie, could you read the bold first bullet there under the dotted line?
If there are so many things in this world that you don't understand, lightning, tides, creation, why should you expect and demand to understand your own suffering? There are some things you will not understand, for you are not God.
So think about that, though. That's really hard. That's a really hard pill to swallow when you are suffering. God's saying, there is so much you don't understand. Why do you expect to understand your own suffering? There's so many reasons for the constellations rising and the tides. There's so many reasons that I have for all of that. And God, that's why God goes on for chapter after chapter after chapter showing all these things. You know, designing snowflakes and hail and all of that. There's so many things you don't understand. The reasons for it, you're not going to understand the reasons for your own suffering. We feel entitled to at least know the reason for it because we experience the suffering. And I only very distantly experience the constellations rising. In fact, most Americans are so divorced from the night sky they don't even know. They just see some stars. But I don't, even though I kind of do experience like the moon rising, and sometimes I notice the moon, it's very disconnected. But the suffering I experience very much. And so I feel sometimes entitled to know why. I have a situation where my hands, since throughout my 30s, the cramp. And it started out when I was working really hard, maybe 10 years ago, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. Now, I can't even unscrew a bottle cap without my hand cramping up and I have to pull it open. So it's getting worse and worse. I don't know what's going to happen.
Have you got trigger fingers?
I don't know.
Does your fingers hang up like this and you have to pull them apart?
Mm-hmm.
You got trigger fingers.
Well, we'll talk about it later. That's not my point. My point is,
I'm a doctor.
I'm concerned about this. This affects my life. I don't know why. Is it a punishment from God? It could be. Is it a result of doing a lot of rock climbing when I was young? It could be. I don't know. And I'm probably not going to get an answer. And I have to accept it. If that means I won't be able to hold my first grandchild, that would make me very sad.
I'm going to help you with it after class.
Okay, yes. You can cut me open and fix all the tendons. Okay, so the point is, even though we really, really want to know our own suffering, we're not going to know. Very rarely is anyone going to get to know. Okay, now we have to get through this bit, Job's final reply. Diane, could you read the orangish box there?
I got this. Then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You ask, Who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak. I will question you, and you shall answer me. My ears have heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes.
Well, repent.
Okay, so that's very key. My ears have heard of you, but now I've seen you.
Okay, does that mean literally seen his face? Because I thought no one could see God's face. And
Well, it said God spoke to Job out of the storm.
so he didn't see his actual face.
Right,
Just like
but he did have a
Moses.
he did have a conversation with God.
Right, but he didn't actually see his
Right, yeah. So his point is, I heard information about you, but now I've interacted with you.
Like Moses saying the backside.
Right.
Sure. There's a lot of mystery in that too, because there is a place where it says Moses spoke to God face to face.
Yes, I know.
So there's some mystery going on about that. But we need to move on here. Okay, so at the end of the book, Job does not say, at last I understand. No, at the end of the book, Job says, I repent. So the question is, what does Job repent of? There's three things.
Judging God,
Well,
questioning him.
we've got the answers here, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Number one, he repents of his arrogance in challenging God's justice. Number two, he repents of his attitude of demanding an answer as though God owed it to him. Number three, he repents of, no, that's a typo there, it's supposed to say not. He repents of not having known God better. Now that I see you, I repent. I thought I knew you. I knew some things about you. But now that I see you and understand you better, and I've actually interacted with you, now I repent. Okay, and here's a quote from D.A. Carson, who is probably the world's leading Bible scholar in the world today. He wrote this about the book of Job, about exactly what we're at right here. So, Diane, could you read the quote?
Okay. What's right underneath?
Yeah.
The whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
To those who do not know God, to those who insist on being God, this will never be a good enough answer. But those who do know God in time come to recognize that it is better to know God and to trust God than to claim the rights of God. Job teaches us that, at least in this world, there will always remain some mysteries to suffering. He also teaches us to exercise faith, not blind, thoughtless submission to an impersonal status quo, but faith in the God who has graciously revealed himself to us.
Okay, and now the epilogue, the happy ending. Well, before the happy ending, actually, there's a little dealing with the friends, which I love. Bev, could you read the epilogue 7 through 10?
After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends, because you have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. So now take 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job, and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer, and not deal with you according to your folly. You have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. So Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite did what the Lord told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before.
Okay, so based on what she just read, did God win his wager with Satan? Yes. Well,
Well, he did.
you have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. He says that twice. As my servant Job has spoken the truth about me. Okay, so let's see. It's not totally clear about the wager. So, by the way, the term wager, or he has a bet with Satan, that makes it sound flippant. The guy says, I bet you somebody's suffering. That it wasn't flippant at all. God knew all the ramifications that it was caused. He had a plan for all of Job's kids and their families and their friends and all of it. God was taking all of it into account when he made his decision to bring this up with Satan. He knew what Satan would say when he said that, bragged about Job.
He also knew that Job would be faithful.
He did. Oh yeah, God. It's pretty hard to lose a bet when you're all-knowing. But let's give Job a grade on some of this. Okay, so Job darkened God's counsel with words without knowledge. Would you say good, bad, okay, or great? Bad. Okay, so we're giving Job a report card here. He was guilty of arrogance that dared to demand God give an account for his actions. Bad. But Job was genuinely groping for the truth. He didn't assume he knew the truth like his friends. That's why he was asking questions. Good. His friends assumed they knew why it was happening, but Job didn't know. So that's good. Job, he questioned God's justice, most of the time affirming it, occasionally denying it. I would say okay. A C. Because he's questioning it. It's not really good because sometimes he does actually say God's not just, but other times he does say, well, God is just, but I just don't get why he's doing this. And I really want to know. And God should tell me. So it's a C minus. It's passing with a D. Let's say that. He does not deny God's sovereignty. Good. He does not curse God. That was a big theme in the prologue. He's worried his kids might curse God in their hearts. His wife tells him to curse God. Yeah, that's good. And he never turns his back on God. All his questions to God, why are you doing this, are all the questions of a believer. So that's great, actually. So yes, God wins the wager. You can't lose a wager when you're all-knowing, obviously.
When you have a tragedy, two things can happen. You can either have a bitterness against God and not even want to believe him anymore, or else you can retain your faith in God and try to draw closer to him and just try to understand that God knows you're suffering.
Yeah. And that is what Job did. Job went straight to, why is God doing this? He didn't go to, well, forget about God, like his wife said. Just curse God and die. Just get it over with. Turn your back on God. He's like, no, I want to know. And in the end, he does know. God has to show up and tell him, but.
I don't know if we have time for this. It's just this verse particularly caught my attention in verse 10 when it says, after Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much. I thought that was, it just caught my eye. That Yahweh's like, well, if he hadn't prayed for his friends, would God not have restored his?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, God is honoring Job by saying to the friends, I'm not going to accept your prayers. If you're going to go to my servant Job and he's going to pray for you, and then I won't deal with you according to as your folly deserves.
So he had, I imagine he had to forgive them to pray for them.
To some degree, yeah. Now, let's just real quick, the doctrine of retribution, because that was a big theme, probably the major theme. Job's friends were wrong to believe in this kind of retribution. Retribution meaning rewards and punishment. It's in red there. A mathematically precise and instant rewards and punishments for good and evil. That's the kind of doctrine of retribution they believed in. It's mathematically precise and an instant reward or punishment for good or evil. So that's not true. But ultimately it is true that in the long run, with much suffering and many questions along the way, God does ultimately punish evil and reward those who trust in him. That's why the book ends this way. Ultimately, now for many of us, it's not until we die. We get to see it happen in Job's lifetime so that we can learn this lesson. But for most of us, it doesn't happen in our lifetime.
Jacob, the way I took that was that they were wrong in the beginning because they didn't know everything, and yet they were very quick to say, you must have done something wrong.
Yes, and in preparing for this week, I realized that, well, because I am a pastor and I've studied the Bible a lot, and sometimes people come to me and ask questions about, why is this thing going wrong in my life? I'm very quick to say, well, I know the answers. And here's what the Bible says about that. Boom. And really, I should say, at least to myself and to God, and probably to the person, first of all, God has many different reasons, and I don't know all the circumstances. But maybe this passage applies. And give him that passage.
It would be wise in counseling, when you don't know really.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just hearing one person's story too.
Yeah. Okay. So the ultimate test here of our faith. Donna, could you read the ultimate test there, at the bottom of page 7?
Is your knowledge of God and walk with God and faith in God strong enough that when faced with excruciating adversity, though it may prompt you to lash out with hard questions, it will never permit you to turn away from God? That was a question.
Yeah. Is your faith strong enough and your walk strong enough? Is it? That's the question for you to pray about. Now, Diane, I promised you we'd talk about the kids. So I added page 8 just for you. Okay. So, what was your question? Something about it seems unfair?
Right. He restored, you can build another house, a barn, it's no big deal, you can replace that. He got 10 more children, but he still mourned for the 10 that he lost. And God also threw this in, which I thought was kind of strange. Well, your daughters are more lovely than any. So he gave him prettier daughters. That's going to make up for the fact, well, at least these are prettier than the ones you lost.
It didn't say they were prettier.
No, they were more lovely than any in the land.
Yeah, but it didn't say they were prettier than your last ones.
Well, but the way...
Yeah, it implied it. It implied it. But now this is very important. Now, okay, so I've just compiled a little list. In chapter 1, this is what he had. Okay? In chapter 42, this is what he had. Okay? Now, what is the obvious striking thing about that?
Doubled everything.
Doubled everything. Okay, but what did 42:10 say? You can turn the page back and look at 42:10. It's the verse that Sue mentioned. He gave him twice as much. Did he give him twice as much, though?
Not with the kids.
Think of poor Mrs. Joe.
Okay, think.
Having all those kids.
Hold on now.
She had 20,
No, pay attention. Did he give him twice as much? Yes or no?
not in every,
Give me a thumbs up. Yes, God gave him twice as much. No, he didn't.
no, he didn't.
Okay. Is it possible that 42:10 is correct and you are wrong? A Bible verse.
Of course.
Is okay. If so, what would that mean?
Did he give him the 10 back that he had?
The same.
No,
The same ones? No.
Did he resurrect them?
he can't resurrect his dead children.
He could,
Well,
sure.
he could have if he
Okay.
Well, it doesn't say that in the Bible.
No.
But he could.
Here.
Well, he didn't.
Look at this, okay? See it. Hopefully this will be on the screen. He has these 10 children, okay? And then they die, and God gives them 10 children and says, now you have double, now you have 20.
Right?
Because their souls are still very much alive.
Oh.
Right.
all the animals are gone.
Right.
All the wealth is gone. But the children,
Are still alive.
they're still actually very much alive.
That's a good one.
Job does not lose his first 10 children in the way that he lost everything else.
Just already in heaven.
Everything else was gone, but his children were not gone. And I'm going to tell you right now, today, Job has 20 children.
Yeah, you did get what?
He did get double everything.
I do like it, because that was the part that always bothered me the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.